Good evening, everyone. I'll call this committee of adjustment hearing to order. Just before we get started this evening, I'm going to go through the protocol for tonight's hearing. We have 4 applications on 3 different properties that we'll be hearing tonight. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. If you have cell phones, if you could please put them on silent mode or turn them off. And if you do come forward to ask any questions, please address the questions through the chair, not directly to the person that you're asking the question. First order of business before we get started will be to ask any committee members if they have any conflicts of interest, followed by any requests or deferrals of applications. Are all applicants here? There's no one online? Okay. Secretary Treasurer will then read out an application noted on the agenda with a brief description and a staff recommendation, as well as a brief summary if there's been any additional correspondence received since the time of the report. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will be asked to come forward. They can go to the podium on the right, state their name and address, and they can add any additional comments that they wish to at that time. Members of the committee will then have the opportunity to ask any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public wishing to speak to that application. Any members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address for the record, try to limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present all questions or comments pertaining to that application or applications, if it's the same property, in that time frame. Persons making a presentation may not necessarily be allowed to return again to the same application. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if they desire. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, a motion will be defeated and a new motion will be made. If motions are defeated, new motions will be made until a decision has been reached. Notices of decision will only be provided to those persons that leave their name and address in writing with the Secretary Treasurer. There's a sign-in page at the back of the room for that purpose here, and for anyone that's watching online that's attending this meeting virtually, they can they can email Taraba at TAYA@portcolborne.ca, or they can call 905-835-2900 extension 204 immediately following the meeting, and they can leave a message there with the same information. It should also be noted that in order to be kept advised of any possible OLT hearings, persons must request to be sent a copy of the committee's decision on an application. Trusting everyone understands the process, I'll look for if there's any conflicts of interest this evening. Eric?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I have a conflict on item 6.2, which is application B02-24-PC, 88 Merritt Parkway, as it's an indirect pecuniary interest, as I am employed by an agent of the applicant, although not the agent on this particular application.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? Not seeing any. Is there any request for deferrals or withdrawals of application this evening? Received any? Not seeing any. So with that, Madam Secretary, the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the agenda tonight, we have 2 minor variance applications and 2 consent applications. Notice of the applications were circulated to the public on February 28th. The required agencies received notice of the applications on February 13th. A recommendation report for each application was prepared by planning staff and made publicly available on March 8th. All correspondence received by March 8th were addressed in the recommendation reports. Those interested can view the recommendation reports online on the city's website or in person at City Hall. Those interested may also contact planning staff in person, by email, or over the phone to obtain a copy of the reports. Accommodations for alternative methods of viewing or obtaining the recommendation reports are available upon request. Please note, the zoning bylaw currently in effect in the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575-3018 as amended, which will henceforth be referred to as the zoning bylaw. Our first application tonight is minor variance application A0124PC for the lands municipally known as 239 Fire Lane 26 in rural residential zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The owners, Ron and Susan Webb, are requesting for relief for provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduced interior yard setback, increased lot coverage, and reduced front yard setback notwithstanding the following. That the interior yard setback of 1.8 meters be permitted, whereas a minimum of 4 meters is required. A maximum lot coverage of 28% be permitted, whereas a maximum of 15% is required. And a front yard setback of 5.16 be permitted, whereas 10 meters is required. Given the information is in the recommendation report, planning staff recommends an application A0124PC be granted as the application is minor in nature, is appropriate for the development of the site, is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant or the agent for the applicant here this evening? Please feel free to come forward to the podium on the left. There's a little red button in front of that gray bar on the table there, if you can push that. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Nothing further to add at this time.
Thank you. Do any committee members have any questions with regards to the application? Not seeing any. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application this evening? Not seeing any. I know we did get some electronics. Was that part of the staff report? I didn't notice it in there, but I might have skipped over it. Okay, so that was addressed. Okay. So with that, if there's no other questions or comments, Eric?
I'd just like to bring forward the recommendation.
Yeah, if there's nothing else.
Okay. Application A01-24-PC, legally known as Lot 18 on Plan 41, municipally known as 239 Fire Lane 26. That minor variance application A01-24-PC be granted for the following reasons. 1, the application is minor in nature as the reduced front yard setback addresses the existing setback and no construction is proposed that would increase the existing encroachment. 2, it is appropriate for the development of the site as staff recognize the lot in the area are small and may result in difficulties meeting the zoning requirements where structures are expanded or constructed. 3, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw as the side yard requirement intends to ensure adequate spacing between dwellings while the front yard setback intends to ensure parking and amenity spaces provided without obstructing the view from the street. 4, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as the official plan permits residential uses within the rural designation.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Angie? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. There is a 20-day waiting period, but following that, you're good to go. Madam Secretary, the next application when you're ready.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now introduce consent application B0224PC. The subject lands are municipally known as 88 Merritt Parkway, located in the first density residential zone. In the application, the agent Carol Moraziuk, on behalf of the owners Justin and Ralph Rotella, is requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new residential lot. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1 and 2 on the proposed sketch, where part 1 is to be severed for a future residential use and part 2 is to be retained for an existing residential use. Given the recommendation reports, planning staff recommend that the respective consent application be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated March 8, 2024. That concludes the correspondence for this application.
Thank you. Is the applicant or the agent for the applicant here? Again, same routine. There's a little red button on that gray bar there on the table. The gray bar beside, yep, perfect. Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
I don't have any, unless you have questions. I'm all right right now.
Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any? Any members of the public that wish to speak to this application this evening? Not seeing any? We don't have anyone online, right? Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Nothing? Recommendation? Dave? Yeah, sure.
Sure, I'll move. I'll just throw in a little comment that the neighbors must be really happy that it's getting cleaned up. When I drove by, I was kind of shocked, and you could see that the work had been done. So, yeah, kudos. So, yeah, sorry, I'm looking right at it too, and it's like, is this the right one? Application B02-24-PC. And in the matter of the lands legally known as Plan 53, part of Lot 18, new Plan 812, municipally known as 88 Merritt Parkway, the consent application B02-24-PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated March 8th, 2024. I'm not going to read them all. Do you want me to? Nope. For the following reasons, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended. And that is it.
A seconder to that, Angie? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sipping right along here. Madam Secretary, whenever you're ready with the next applications, and if you want, you can do them both together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our last application tonight is consent application A1823PC and its accompanying minor variance application A2323PC. The subject lands are municipally known as 583 Fielden Avenue in the second density residential zone. In the application B1823PC, the agent Kirk Guthrow, on behalf of the owner Betty Guthrow, is requesting the committee's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new residential lot. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1 and 2 on the proposed sketch, where part 1 is to be severed for a new residential use and part 2 is to be retained for an existing residential use. In the application A2323PC, the agent and their client are requesting for relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit the reduction in lot area, notwithstanding the following: that the reduced lot area of 396.2 meters squared be permitted, whereas 400 meters squared is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommends application A2323PC be granted as the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Given the recommendation reports, planning staff also recommend that the respective consent application be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated March 8, 2024. This report can be requested for viewing by the public, if desired, through the planning staff. That concludes the correspondence for these applications.
Thank you. Is the agent or the applicant here for that application? Gray bar, red button. That's the one.
Good evening.
Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
No, everything's in the application. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions or comment of the applicant this evening? Not seeing any. No members of the public here to speak to this application. With that, I see the on the original drawing or sketch, the extension to the garage has already been removed.
Yes.
It said, I think on the drawing, there's a stone or a concrete pad there. Has that been removed? It looked like it was all broken up.
Yeah, it's already broken up. We were just waiting for everything to go through before we hauled it away, and yeah, make sure that everything was what you guys wanted, and then yeah, it's ready to go.
Sounds good. So with that, mover and a seconder, Gary. If you want to do them both together, or if you want to do one at a time, that's at your leisure. Okay. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to application B1823, lands legally known as Lot 1 and 2 on Plan 3252, municipally known as 583 Fielden Avenue. The consent application B1823 PCB granted subject to conditions outlined in the staff report dated March 8, 2024. The applicant provides the Secretary Treasurer with deeds in triplicate for the conveyance of the subject parcel or a registrable legal description of the subject parcel, together with a paper copy and electronic copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. 2, that a final certification fee of $240 payable to the City of Port Colborne is submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. 3, that minor variance application A2323 be approved by the Committee of Adjustment. 4, that the applicant signs the City of Port Colborne Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining that development charges and cash in lieu, the dedication of land for park purposes based on an appraisal at the expense of the applicant wherein the value of the land is to be determined as of the day before the issuance of a building permit is required prior to the issuance of a building permit pursuant to Section 42 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 as amended. 5, that the applicant owner receive acceptance from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism for the archaeological assessment report titled Stage 1-2 Archaeological Assessment prepared by Detritus Consulting Limited. If the ministry requires further archaeological work to be completed prior to the acknowledging this report. These reports must also be submitted to and acknowledged by the ministry to the satisfaction of Niagara Region. Prior to clearance of this condition, no demolition, grading, or other soil disturbances shall take place on the subject property prior to the issuance of a letter from MCM through Niagara Region confirming that all archaeological resource concerns have met licensing and resource conservation requirements. 6, that a 3 by 5 meter by 3.5 meter site triangle on the southwest corner of Part 2 be conveyed to the City of Port Colborne. 7, that existing concrete pad on Part 1 be removed. 8, the east-west running fence on Part 1 be removed. 9, that all conditions of consent be cleared by March 13th, 2026, for the following reasons. The applicant is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the regional official plan, City of Port Colborne official plan, and will also comply with the provisions of zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Eric? Questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. And Gary, did you want to do the variance as well?
Sure. Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. I should have done. Thank you, Chair. Application 23-23 PC, the land's legally known as Lot 1 and 2 on Plan 3252, municipally known as 583 Fielden Avenue. The minor variance application A2323 PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature. The reduction of lot area from 400 square meters to 396.2 square meters is minor, as a 3.8 meter difference will not drastically change the size of the property and would not negatively impact the adjacent properties. It is appropriate for the development of the site as a retained lot and existing dwelling meet the zoning requirements and provide enough amenity space and landscaped area on the retained parcel. 3 is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaws. The minor changes do not affect the ability for a dwelling to be located on the site, which is the intent of the lot area requirements. The existing dwelling is not proposed to change, and proposed lot lines do not create zoning issues. 4, it is desirable in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan, as the official plan permits residential uses within the urban residential designation.
Thank you. A seconder to that? Angie? Questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. There's a 20-day waiting period for both, and as long as there's no objections, and there's a few conditions that you have to meet for the consent, but other than that, you should be good to go.
I'd just like to say thank you to the committee. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you too. All right. Is there any other business? Not seeing any. Can I get a mover for the February minutes? Angie, Eric, all those in favor? That'll be carried. With that, I'll consider our meeting adjourned.